Hi guys, today we're going to be looking at my predictions for this year's Edexcel Paper 2 for A-Level PE. So that's 2025 paper. It's coming up in about a couple of weeks' time. And we're looking at the skill acquisition, the sports psychology, and the social aspects part of paper 2, which is again for this year 2025. So if you're watching this in a year's time, it's not worth watching, you might as well turn it off. So a couple of things we want to break into is over the last couple of years we've got a breakdown of the structure of the exam questions. So you're generally going to have first part of the paper is about 50 marks, which is going to be skill acquisition and sports psychology, and then the second part of the paper is going to be the social aspects for another 50 marks. So you've got about an even split between the skill and then the psychology, and then you've got another 50 marks or so for the social aspects. And what you might notice is that the skill is traditionally, and you can see that the trend over the last couple of years, it's sort of 2 marks followed by 4 marks and then 15 marks. So again, last year and the last 2 years it's been 3 2-mark questions, sorry, and then 1 4-mark question and a 15-mark question. So you don't need a huge amount of evaluative skills in the skill acquisition. It's more descriptive and stating, but then you will need to be able to do 1 15-mark in the skill acquisition. The psychology is quite similar, so you've got 1 mark, 2 marks, 3-mark questions. The only change is they dropped one of the 2 markers and put in 1 4-marker. Or a couple of the 2 markers brought in a 4-marker. So it generally goes 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks, 4 marks, and then 1 15-marker. So progressively gets harder in how you write it. But again, the longest sort of question other than 15-marker is going to be 3 to 4 marks in the psychology question section. So it's about being able to recall and regurgitate and state the knowledge aspects of the paper rather than necessarily the evaluative stuff. The social is a lot more extended writing involved, and typically you've got a 1-marker which will be define, 2 marks, a couple of 2 marks in there which will be maybe provide an example or an expanded point, 1 3-marker, 1 4-marker, but then we get an 8-marker in, which is usually an evaluative point where you need to present 2 sides of an argument or discussion point, followed by 2 15-markers back to back. Okay, so we'll go through some of my predictions on what you want to revise for this year. So starting with the skill, first area I would suggest to revise is the dissection of the skill. Now I've sort of suggested that this area here, this is the years, so if you want a bit of understanding of how I'm working this out, these are previous years from the samples, previous years up to 2025, so the paper you're about to sit. And an area that's due to come up is this dissection of the skill. So, breaking the skill down into preparation, execution, follow through, and the result. I've put it as a slightly different shape because I'm not convinced it will necessarily be asked because it is something that's covered in the coursework. So, but it has been asked in the past, so it's worth just brushing up on that area. I don't think it'll be a 15-marker. I think you'll get away with just 2 marks. 3 marks if that. Okay, then coming down here, I suggest you definitely look at the learning theories and just general area of learning theories. I think that's an area that they're due to ask. It has been, if you go back to 2022 paper and have a look at the 15-marker as a good revision tool, and I think you're probably going to be looking around about Thorndike's laws. Lends itself nicely to a 3-marker. Possibly some of the theories like classical and operant conditioning, really focusing on that SR bond and how the SR bond is strengthened. Possibly the Fitz and Posner's model, but that has been asked recently. I would suggest, if I was a gambling man, Thorndike's laws first, but brush up on the whole of the learning theories. So moving on to the skill, I would suggest that a couple of areas, these stars is where I think could possibly be 15-mark exam questions. It's sort of, I would suggest practice methods, so like whole part, whole progressive part practice, perhaps the structure of massed and distributed practice, fixed practice. So you've got practice methods and structured practice, but also the mental practice. Now, if you look, mental practice hasn't been asked at all, so it's due to come up at some point soon. If it was asked about mental practice, I don't think it'd be a long answer question. I think it'd be maybe 2-3 marks. But it could be that 15-mark area. So I suggest you go back to the sample paper, which is a 4-marker, 2019 paper, which is fixed and distributed practice, 23 paper, and just brush up on some of those questions because it's due to come up. I definitely would suggest it. The other area that's due to come up soon, and if you look at the regularity, it's coming up every so often, is guidance methods. And again, that lends itself to a really nice 15 marker. And if you go back to the 2018 paper, there's already been a 15 marker there. So a while ago, it wouldn't surprise me to see a 15 mark question on guidance methods, and revising 15 marker on guidance methods will set you up for any other questions that could come up on guidance methods. So, visual guidance, the mechanical, manual guidance, the verbal guidance, that sort of aspects there. Now, there was a technology question in your science paper, paper 1, so linking it into this area, probably not likely to come up now. They've already asked it in there. And bear in mind, the science paper was using knowledge and understanding from across the course study. That doesn't mean not to say they won't ask you one in this paper 2, but it has been asked already. So this may be something you don't have to panic too much about. Types of feedback as well is an area that is due to come up. Hasn't been asked for a while, since 21. I would probably be revising the open and closed loop theories. It's a challenging one for students to get stuck on that area, so definitely have a look at that area. And then you've got the types of feedback as well. Now, do I think it'd be a 15 marker? Probably not, but it doesn't hurt to each of those sections. For example, if you revised, 5 marks worth of open and closed loop, 5 marks of the types of feedback and the importance of feedback for another 5 marks, you get yourself a 15-mark question there anyway. So breaking it down, it's worth the revision. And then we get into memory models, and I don't really think this area is likely to come up. It was asked sort of last year, looking at Whiting's and Welford's model of information processing. So they've sort of covered that area of memory models. If I was going to revise anything on memory, I would probably focus more on the actual the recall, recognition, and types of schemas to do with memory and information processing. Again, it's not to say it's not going to come up, but again, I would probably leave that till the end of my revision and focus on some of those other areas of skill. Bear in mind, there's only a few sections that can be asked. Having said that, don't plan on what I've just said, because if you don't revise the areas and there's only a handful that come up, then you could be caught short there. Right, if we move into the psychology paper, I would start my revision probably on the triadic model of attitude formation and how attitudes are changed. Now, there's a big load of information there that could quite easily lend itself to a 15-mark question. It hasn't been a 15-mark question in this area yet. So again, that's probably why I probably suggest it might be worth revising as a 15-marker. Personality was asked last year, so again, the likelihood of that coming up is probably slim. Arousal has been asked quite regularly, but I would go with attitudes first. And then for the psychology paper, we have aggression. And again, if we look at aggression, it's something that comes up on a regular occurrence, so possibly due to come up this year. Lends itself nicely to a 15-mark exam question. You could go back to 2018 paper to have a look at that sort of question as well, that 15-marker that they've used before. Theories of aggression, and there's a bunch of theories of aggression that you could be revising and easily bring into 15-mark question. So have a look at that one. And then motivation methods and motivation, types of motivation, and all elements of motivation, achievement motivation particularly, I think, is an area due to come up. And could it be another 15 marker not been asked before? An easy area to get content for 15 marks. So do brush up on your motivation strategies. And then we come to the areas I probably wouldn't spend a huge amount on, but it doesn't mean that it won't come up, but social facilitation, the impacts of, and that links to arousal as well. So you're sort of revising both areas if you're doing that. And then cohesion was asked, group cohesion was asked last year. So can it be coming up again? Yeah, it could do, but I wouldn't hedge my bets on that one. And then goal setting, I think, is due to come up. It's not been asked for a while. It was asked back in 21 as a 15 marker, probably not a 15 marker this time round, but go to 2021 paper just to brush up on some of the content there for goal setting. You've got also attribution theory. Again, that was a 15 marker in 2022. Not likely to be a 15 marker again, but the content there, probably 2-3 marker on attribution theory, maybe attribution retraining, something along those lines. The two other areas I think would be worthwhile investing a bit of revision for potential 15 markers if you look, doesn't get asked very regularly at all. So it's due to come up is confidence and Veely's model of sports confidence and the models of confidence. So loads you could bring into that for 15 marker, and then self-efficacy. So you can see it's asked quite regularly as a short answer question, but the area lends itself nicely to 15 marks. Okay, then we go into the social aspects, and really what you can see is probably the corporations are due to come up. Now, they do like to ask a lot of short answer questions on just the general historical aspects of sport and just making sure you know the basics of the pre-industrial and post-industrial sports and the changes to that. But there was a lot of questions asked last year on the rationalization of rational recreation and muscular Christianity and the development and status of women. So probably asked, not going to get a huge question on it. And there was a 15 mark exam question a while ago on this area. So area that hasn't come up recently is this representing corporations rather than geographical based teams. So something that's definitely worth revising. And then last year the 15 marker was on migration patterns, so probably not due to come up this year. Then we've got about globalization. I probably will be revising something along the impact of the British Empire and the colonial spread of the British Empire and how sport was globalized. Now that's due to come up, hasn't come up for a while. Can I just point out that in that 2019 paper that it was an AS paper back in there they don't have AS papers anymore, but it's really tricky questions, so worth brushing that one up. I think I made a video on it already that you could easily go back and revise using that, but it's definitely worth a revising section there. Now I have put about the Olympics, but last year's question was more on the globalization aspects of hosting an Olympic Games. So would they ask another question on Olympics? Not 100% sure, but it is due to come up. Commercialization is due to come up, and the Olympics are heavily influenced on the commercialization part of it. So not so much these definitions of advertising, sponsorship, and endorsement, because that was asked recently, but maybe just the impact of commercialization. And that's generally a nice 15 mark exam question. You can see the regularity of these 15 mark exam questions in previous years, 21, 19, on the impacts of commercialization. And I've put 15 there because when I was predicting it with my students, that's what I think could be a 15 marker. However, there was an exam question on the Olympics last year, so will it come up again? Who knows? Let's move on. And the ethics and deviance is my best bet, or I think maybe one of the 15 markers to be. Again, it's an area that comes up regularly. These are aspects of 15 markers comes up again and again. It lends itself really nicely to 15 markers. It hasn't been asked really heavily since 2022. I would guess that I would hedge my bets on performance enhancing drugs. Has it progressively been getting worse, or is it still is there a lack of drugs in sport, or is it getting worse, for example? That sort of question lends itself nicely to just general deviance and gameship. Is it increasing, or is it staying the same way as it was. So definitely a big area to revise. Ethics and deviance, and again they do chuck some questions that are quite challenging on the ethics and deviance. So look back at the 2022 paper, because that is a challenging question on ethics and deviance. It's worth looking at that one. This bit in red here is because they've never really asked a question other than the sample questions. Worth looking back at the sample for like how technology is used to combat the sort of use of drugs and stuff like that, and the development of WADA. Now, WADA's not really been asked, so something you could be brushing up on as well. That's why I think this whole area of ethics deviance is definitely worth an investment of your time. And then we get into the final stages, and I would just probably look at, and bear in mind technology was asked in the paper, in the science paper this year, will potentially the impact of media and that and the impact it has on the viewing side of the spectators. So that's an area that could come up. It's due to come up, and you see it regularly pops in as a question. It has been a 15 marker back in 21. Probably going to be a low marker if it comes up, but it's worth the revising time there. I would then, for my next area of 15 markers, would be the talent ID. And generally, when you look back at them, it goes a comparison from England to either East Germany or England to Australia. My guess would be it's due to come up to against Australia, and you can see the regular pattern goes East Germany, Australia, East Germany, and it's due to be Australia. So hopefully, if that does come up, that's the pattern it's going to follow. But it's definitely worth brushing up that whole talent ID area. I've done a video on that. You can go back on the playlist and have a look at that. And then potentially this idea of mass participation. The influence of wearable technologies on mass participation really just hasn't really been asked. If you look back there, partly in the sample about mass participation, regular questions on mass participation. So that's another reason why we want to be looking at that promotion of mass participation. Do brush up on some of the initiatives of mass the Sport England initiatives, for example. And again, there's a video on that. That's worthwhile popping into just to get your head around. But again, that's an area that I would be revising, this concept of mass participation and promotion of participation rates. So just in summary, skill areas that I'd be looking at is learning theories, practice methods, structures, mental practices, guidance methods, feedback, particularly looking at closed and open loop, maybe a dissection of skill, maybe schema, but these top ones are my bets. Then in psychology, you've got things like attitudes, and I've put in here potential 15 markers that I would think, I haven't put it on there, but I would probably go practice methods, guidance, and feedback as my 15 markers. But yeah, attitudes, aggression, attribution theory, confidence, which potentially be an area of 15 markers, goal setting, and motivation as areas to focus on for your first part of paper 2. And then in the social aspects, corporations, colonial diffusion, probably something to do with commercialization, and include the Olympics in that. Ethics and deviance, again, and including PEDs, so I'll probably look at that as a 15 marker. Media, i.e. the viewing experience to spectators. Talent ID, probably an area easily 15 marker, or the 8 markers. And mass participation rates. So on this channel, I generally make this for my students, my own A-level PE students, but I know other people watch it. And I don't really care if people like and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. But I do like some sort of, where people do get in touch and just let me know how they get on. And, I've just crediting one lad who's contacted me just to thank me. And apparently he used my videos to get one of the highest grades in Europe. So, hopefully these help. If they do help, great. And, best of luck in your exams. I'll put a few more videos out on some of these areas that I haven't already made. So good luck in the exams, and I'll see you in the next video.